suffocated by the chaos of the kingdom. He did something reckless. He disguised himself as a beggar. In the pouring rain, he walks alone until a light in the dead of night calls to him. A bakery still open. He steps inside, and in that moment, fate makes its choice. Will it be fortune or ruin? The act that could change everything. Night seemed to swallow the city. No star dared pierce the dark clouds that lingered over Valdener's poor rooftops. The rain fell heavily, as if someone above wanted to wash the world of sin, or drown it altogether. The narrow streets were bare of pavement, only mud and trash driven by the wind. A shadow staggered between alleys and lanes. A man! Soaked rags, broken steps, weary but attentive gaze. He was a beggar no one gave a second glance. And precisely because of that, no one noticed his trembling hands clutching something beneath his cloak. Hidden near his chest, attached to a silver chain, was a royal medallion, marked with a crowned lion symbol, the crest of the kingdom of Elander. Each time the cold metal touched his skin, he seemed to remember who he was and what he was running from being. Lightning ripped through the sky, illuminating ruins, shacks, and children sleeping in wooden crates. Hunger lived there. Injustice, too. Royalty lived far away, blind to the suffering that grew like weeds in the streets. The beggar stopped under the broken awning of an abandoned tailor shop. He coughed hard and leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. "Hold on," he muttered to himself. "Just a little longer." But the storm seemed to mock him. Two men passed by carrying sacks, perhaps flour, perhaps stolen coal. They didn't even glance at him. In that city, poverty didn't attract attention. It was part of the landscape. A clap of thunder shook the ground. The biting wind carried the smell of sea air mixed with decay. The beggar clutched the medallion even tighter. He was cold, but there was another ice inside him. Fear. Fear of being recognized. Fear of the reason that had brought him here. Fear of the truth itself. I needed shelter. I needed to survive until dawn. Then he saw a light, dim but welcoming, emanating from a small wooden building on the corner ahead. A chimney was smoking. A bakery. That time of night? Who would work in the rain and misery? He took a deep breath, took the first step towards the light, and thought, if there is still kindness in this world, I will find it here. And he continued on, not knowing that that door would change not only his life, but the fate of an entire kingdom. The door to the small bakery creaked as the beggar pushed it open. The sound echoed like an intruder in a sacred place. Inside was a different world from the street. Warm lamplit, with the smell of freshly baked bread filling the air like a childhood memory. He entered cautiously, leaving a trail of water from his soaked coat. Behind the counter, a woman worked alone. Her face was focused, her sleeves rolled up, her hands covered in flour. She was simple, but there was something luminous about her. A kind of quiet strength no longer found in the people of that kingdom. Her hair was tied up haphazardly, with stray strands escaping, and her gaze steady, suspicious. She was Elena. His hands stopped when he saw the stranger. "We're closed," he said without raising his voice. He tried to speak, but his dry throat produced only a weak noise. He coughed, stumbling in his own exhaustion. I just wanted a place to wait for the rain to pass." She frowned. "I don't give shelter to thieves. I'm not a thief." She searched his eyes. She found no lie, but no explanation either. She remained silent for a few seconds, deciding whether to kick him out, as everyone would do, or break her own rule. He sighed. "Lean over there near the oven, but don't touch anything." He nodded gratefully and walked to the far corner. The warmth of the oven brought immediate relief. His shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. Elena placed a clay mug in front of him. Hot water. He stared at her, surprised. "Why are you helping me?" She replied without emotion. "Because no one else helps." He wrapped both hands around the mug and watched from afar as she went back to working the bread dough, as if the outside world couldn't touch her. There was weariness in her. There was pain. But there was also dignity. For an instant, their eyes met. There was no romance yet, no promises, just a rare spark. Human recognition. He thought. "Who is this woman?" She thought. "What are you hiding?" Neither of them said it, but they both felt the same thing. That night was not over yet. Dawn arrived timidly, as if afraid to look at that part of the kingdom. The rain had stopped, but the mud still stuck to the streets as a reminder that nothing here was easy. From the bakery chimney, a thin column of smoke rose into the gray sky. Elena was already up before sunrise. Alone. Always alone. The table was covered in raw dough, bowls of flour, and empty baskets. She worked in silence, kneading the dough firmly, as if unloading the pain in her hands. Meanwhile, at the door, a line of weary faces formed. Beggars, widows, street children. People invisible to royalty. "A loaf of bread, Mrs. Elena?" "Just a little piece," asked a thin girl, holding her little brother's hand. "Wait outside. It'll be ready soon," Elena said, still working. One of the neighbors, Marta, a middle-aged woman with a sour expression, came in, zipping up her coat. "You're going to get arrested one day, girl. We can't keep giving away free bread." She tossed some coins on the counter. "They caught Joao yesterday, just because he tried to sell fish without paying tax." Elena paused for a moment, her eyes hardening. A kingdom that imprisons a family man because a fish has no king. It has predators. Marta looked at her with compassion and fear. "Speak softly. There are people listening." Outside, a child coughed loudly. Elena dropped everything and ran to get a bowl of soup. "They have no one," he murmured. "If I don't do anything, who will?" The truth was simple and brutal. Elena had no power, no protection, just courage. And that was what made her dangerous to the powerful. The sun had barely risen, and the city was already pulsing. Not with life, but with survival. Valdener, the capital of the kingdom of Elander, was divided into two cities. One made of gold, the other made of hunger. The poor part of the kingdom, where Elena's bakery was located, was a maze of crooked houses, damp alleys, and open sewers. People lurked among simple stalls, selling what little they had. A worn piece of soap, a rotten piece of fruit, a pair of patched boots, and guards, always guards, patrolling, charging, taking. In the center of the square, a wooden sign announced in red letters, "Emergency tax by order of the Royal Council." A man muttered near the broken fountain. "Emergency for whom? I've never seen any king bleed for us." "Keep your voice down," warned another. "They say the king has disappeared. No one knows where he is." The first one laughed bitterly. "Gone? Or ran away?" Rumors traveled faster than hotcakes. Some said he had been poisoned. Others that he had been kidnapped by rebels. And still others believed he was dead, and that the council was hiding it to feed the taxes and secretly enrich themselves. Meanwhile, on the other side of the wall that divided the city, the royal district marble towers, clean streets, and ornate gardens. Carriages passed on cobblestones, well-groomed horses neighed. Men and women laughed as they toasted expensive wines in elegant taverns. From above, the castle dominated the landscape, beautiful, distant, and indifferent. For the rich, the kingdom was at peace. For the poor, it was daily war. And between these two worlds walked someone who knew them like no one else. A man who looked like a beggar, but with a look that had never belonged to the poor. He walked and watched, in silence, always hiding the royal medallion under his cloak. The morning remained cold, and the line outside the bakery only grew longer. Elena worked tirelessly, serving each person with the same patience, without humiliating anyone, without asking anything that would offend anyone's dignity. The beggar, now drier, but still with a drawn face, watched from a corner. He had offered to leave at dawn, but Elena had only said, "You can stay until the rain stops, or until you decide where you're going." He didn't know how to answer, so he stayed. Without making a sound, he helped stack sacks of flour, swept the floor, and fed the oven. Elena noticed, but pretended not to. He also pretended not to notice her. At the door, an orphan boy, Nicholas, tried to run in and take 2 loaves of bread without paying. Elena grabbed his arm, but not angrily. "Thief again, Nico? I'm hungry." She handed him 2 loaves of bread. "Next time, enter through the front. Here, no one needs to steal to avoid death." He smiled shyly and ran off. The beggar watched the scene, intrigued. "Aren't you afraid of losing everything by helping others?" Elena shrugged. "You don't lose what you never had." "And what is this?" "Security." She placed more bread on the counter. "People like me are born in the firing line of fate." The answer hung in the air for a few seconds. There was too much truth in it. He thought before speaking, like someone trained to choose each word. "In my world, they taught that those who don't fight for themselves deserve nothing. But I think I was deceived." She stared at him. He looked away. His eyes held a story that didn't match his appearance. And for the first time, Elena thought, "Who is this man, really?" And he thought, "How long until they find out I'm here?" The tension between them was not just human. It was destiny. The afternoon fell heavily on Valdener, heavy with gray clouds and tense murmurs in the streets. Elena was just closing the bakery when heavy footsteps echoed across the stone floor. 2 men appeared out of nowhere, wearing the austere uniforms of the kingdom, heavy belts and cruel gazes. One of them held a sealed scroll. "Dono Elena, your debts to the kingdom's taxes have not been paid," the man announced. "Today we will take what belongs to you, and perhaps more." Elena lifted her head. "I have nothing but what's here." She gestured toward the bakery, the counter, the still cooling loaves. "And I don't owe anyone my dignity." The collector laughed cruelly. "We'll see how long this lasts." The beggar, who had been watching from his back against the wall, didn't think twice. An impulse born of exhaustion, pent-up anger, and the need to protect this woman who showed humanity in a world that lacked it. He stepped forward. "Hey, leave her alone," he shouted. The first guard turned, surprised, but reacted quickly. Punches, shoves, kicks. The beggar fell into the mud. His torn coat now covered bruises and scratches. Still, he managed to stand, staring at them with unwavering eyes. There was little difference between him and any other starving person in the city. But there was something else in his eyes, something no one there could understand. Elena, trembling, dropped the bread basket and ran to help him. She wiped the rainwater from his hair, wiped his bloody face, and whispered, Are you crazy?" "Crazy? Maybe. But someone had to do something," he replied, breathless. She smiled slightly, her eyes welling up, as she ran her hand through his hair as if soothing a child. A simple gesture, but loaded with meaning. They were no longer strangers. There was trust and gratitude in the air. The beggar leaned against the wall, breathing deeply. The fear lingered, but something changed. Between them, assailant connection, made of courage, shared pain and humanity. The world outside was still cruel, but inside, even for a few minutes, there was shelter. The rain had stopped, but the ground still reflected the gray sky. Inside the bakery, the oven warmed the room, spreading warmth and the smell of freshly baked bread. Elena sat on a stool near the counter, wetting a cloth to wipe the mud from the beggar's face. He remained seated, breathing heavily, his eyes fixed on the flour scattered on the counter. "You speak strangely for someone who seems to live on the streets," she said, trying to break the silence. He gave a faint, tired smile. "The streets haven't taught me everything, but you can observe many things, if you want to see. Injustice, greed, cowardice, and also courage." Elena frowned, surprised by the lucidity of those words. "No one has called me brave before," she said quietly. "No one worthy would do that," he replied, almost whispering. A silence fell, heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, Elena decided to open her heart. "My father. He was arrested, just for questioning his taxes. He never came back. And my mother? Well, my mother died shortly after." She swallowed. "That's why I try to do something, even with nothing. I can't let others go through the same thing." The beggar looked at her with absolute attention. "I understand. It's rare for someone to have the courage to continue helping when they've already lost so much. Most close themselves off, letting the world harden their hearts." She looked at him, studying his dirty, scarred face. There was something there, beyond the shabby appearance. Intelligence, perception, strategy. "And you? Why do you keep risking yourself in the rain to protect someone you barely know?" He looked away, touching the medallion hidden beneath his cloak. "Sometimes, protecting a stranger is the only way to remember that humanity still exists." She felt a chill. These weren't just empty words. He knew the world, knew pain, knew weakness, yet he still chose to act. In that moment, between the heat of the oven and the smell of bread, a silent understanding was born between them. They weren't just survivors, they were allies of something bigger, even if they didn't know what it was yet. The bakery bell rang abruptly, not because of the time, but because of the thud of heavy boots against the stone street. Elena raised her head, frowning. Outside, for kingdom guards approached, armed, their faces serious, their eyes scrutinizing every detail. Tension hung in the air. Everyone there knew a mistake would cost them dearly. "Open the door," ordered the chief guard. "We're looking for someone missing from the palace. Any suspects must be turned in immediately." The beggar took a few steps back, his hand clutching the medallion hidden under his coat. His heart raced. If they recognized him, all would be lost. The identity he carried in secret could destroy not only him, but also the silent plan he had been hatching. Elena stood rigid, looking from one to the other, not fully understanding what was happening. "A missing person?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I don't know what they're talking about." "Don't lie," the guard replied, approaching. "We're investigating suspicious individuals who may be involved with the king. Any information is relevant." The beggar swallowed hard. Every muscle in his body tensed. He knew he couldn't show too much fear, couldn't reveal himself. But Elena, beside him, didn't deserve to be in danger because of him. He took a deep breath and said quietly, almost to himself, "We can't let him notice anything." The guards approached the counter, scanning the bakery. They took in every detail. The heat of the oven, the still warm bread, the muddy marks on the floor. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating. Elena tried to maintain her composure, but she felt the beggar's hand, firm and quick, on her shoulder. A silent gesture of protection. "We're just selling bread," she said, keeping her tone firm. The guard leader raised an eyebrow suspiciously, but something about the small bakery and the exchange of glances made him hesitant. One detail didn't add up. A mystery hung over the drenched, tired man. As the guards left without asking any further questions, the beggar let out a breath trapped in his lungs. His heart was still racing, but something had changed. He knew that in this kingdom divided between opulence and famine, every gesture of kindness and every secret were silent weapons. And the game was just beginning. The next morning's sun timidly filtered through the bakery's dusty windows. The air still smelled of fresh bread and burning wood. The beggar, now dry and clean, watched Elena work, her movements precise and graceful as she kneaded the dough firmly and carefully. "You're quick with those hands," he said, trying to ease the tension from the night before. "It's like the bread is ready-made from the ground up." Elena looked up and arched an eyebrow. "What about you? Have you ever made bread before?" she teased, a hint of humor amidst her weariness. "Only in my dream," he replied, smiling for the first time. The corner of his mouth trembled, but he meant it. She laughed, a clear sound that cut through the monotony of the gray morning. "Then you better not dream too much, or you might end up in trouble again." He approached, discreetly helping her sort the ingredients. Butter, flour, yeast, small gestures that didn't go unnoticed. When Elena held out a bowl for him to mix the dough, his hand brushed against hers for a moment. A silent shock. They both looked away, but something had changed. Between batches, the beggar began to notice details. Her care for the children passing by, the smile she offered each hungry customer, her almost supernatural patience in the face of difficulties that would make anyone give up. It was impossible not to admire her quiet strength. "You don't give up, do you?" he asked. "I can't," Elena replied, as she shaped loaves of bread into perfect shapes. "Who will do it if I give up?" There was tenderness in that small space, an intimacy that grew without words. He told short stories of street observations, and she laughed quietly at life's ironies. Amidst scattered flour and beads of sweat, an unlikely partnership was born. The beggar realized he wanted to stay there, not just for protection, but to be by her side. And Elena, though she didn't yet fully understand who he was, felt his presence carry something she couldn't even name. The world outside was still cruel, but there, in the bakery, there was warmth, restrained laughter, and a silent promise. Together, they could withstand whatever came. The sun was burning higher, and the city was beginning to boil with heat and work. Elena carried baskets of still warm bread to the street, distributing them to the children, beggars, and elderly who crowded around the bakery. Each smile she received was a small triumph against hunger, but also an ever-increasing risk. "Donna Elena, you're going to draw too much attention," the beggar whispered, watching her from a corner. "The guard won't ignore this for long." She looked at him, serious but determined. "If I don't do anything, they'll keep dying. And I can't live with that." A group of guards appeared, crossing the square with firm steps. The leader raised his hand, and the murmur of the crowd subsided. "Elena's bakery," he shouted. "It is forbidden to distribute bread without registration. We will shut this place down immediately if you don't cooperate." The beggar felt a tightness in his chest. But this time, there was no fear. He stood up straight, facing the guards with his shoulders straight. "You're not going to touch her," he said, his voice firm. "These people have a right to something you took away long ago: dignity." The leader arched an eyebrow, surprised by her boldness. "Who are you to challenge the royal guard?" He didn't answer. He just stared, silent, conveying a determination that made the guards hesitate. Small children watched, fearful, but with hope in their eyes. Elena stepped closer, placing her hand on his arm. "Thank you, but don't hurt yourself on my account." "It's not for you," he replied quietly. "It's for them, for all the voiceless." The leader took a deep breath, assessing the scene. A small bakery, a few beggars, starving children, and a man who, despite appearing vulnerable, seemed to have the courage to face the full force of the kingdom. Finally, he stamped his foot and said, "Today you will be saved, but this is the last warning." The guards walked away, muttering. The beggar let out a breath he'd been holding. Elena looked at him, her eyes brimming with gratitude and admiration. At that moment, between the smell of bread and the heat of the oven, something changed. They weren't just surviving. They were fighting for justice, and together they were stronger than any threat. The oven gave off a steady heat, and the aroma of freshly baked bread filled the small bakery. mingling with the faint light that filtered through the dusty windows. Elena was bent over the dough, carefully shaping the loaves, while the beggar watched her, still discreetly. The tension of the street had vanished, replaced by something softer, almost palpable. "You never stop," he said, breaking the silence. "Even after everything. You still help everyone." She looked up at him. "And you? Didn't you ask why I stay?" A slight smile played on her lips. He hesitated, then stepped closer, his hand almost touching hers as he held a bowl of flour. "Why? Why does someone keep giving when they've already lost so much?" Elena sighed, looking at the dough that was now beginning to rise. "Because there's no choice. Whoever is hungry, cold, or afraid, it's up to us. If I give up, they lose something they can't achieve on their own." He looked at her, intrigued. "Even if it hurts you?" "It hurts every day," she admitted, lowering her head. "But it also keeps me alive. If there's no hope, what's the point of surviving?" The beggar smiled, almost without realizing it. "I've never heard anyone speak like that." He ran his hands through the dough carefully, as if each gesture were a prayer. "Maybe that's why people follow you without realizing it." Elena looked up, meeting his eyes. There was something in his eyes that went beyond curiosity. An intensity, a quiet attentiveness that made her every word carry more weight than any force in the kingdom. "And you?" she asked softly. "Why are you here, helping a stranger?" He looked away, touching the medallion hidden beneath his cloak. "Maybe because protecting someone like this reminds me of what is right, of what is human." She smiled gently and returned to the dough. A comfortable silence fell between them. It wasn't just shared work, it was trust. Small gestures, glances, subtle touches. They laughed at the same effort, felt the same warmth. At that moment, it wasn't just Elena and the beggar. They were two souls who had found something rare: understanding, respect, and the first spark of true connection. High in the castle, in a room decorated with rich tapestries and dark mahogany furniture, Counselor Morven surveyed the kingdom through a narrow window. The morning light reflected off the cold stone of the tower, highlighting the thin, calculating smile on his lips. He held a parchment, scrawled with orders that could alter the fate of the kingdom. "If the king shows up," he muttered to himself, his voice low and sharp, "he will be declared a traitor." An aide bowed, nearly swallowed by the council's shadow. "What if he's in disguise, sir?" Morven raised an eyebrow, cold. "Then we'll find signs. There are always signs. A look that doesn't fit, a gesture out of place. No detail escapes us. He cost us dearly once. There will be no second chance." Meanwhile, in the city, the beggar walked slowly through the square, observing the movement, absorbing every sound. The medallion still hidden under his cloak weighed more than gold. He could not imagine that, while he breathed freely among the muddy streets, the castle was already plotting its silent destruction. Every loaf of bread he distributed, every act of kindness he performed toward Elena, could become a deadly accusation. Elena, oblivious to the conspiracy, continued her routine in the bakery, smiling at children, shaping bread, spreading warmth and humanity. But he sensed the danger before she did. He sensed it in the whispers of the town, in the tense looks of the guards, and in the stories circulating about unexplained disappearances and silent hunts. "Something's going to happen," he said quietly, kneading dough beside her. "Something big." "Why do you say that?" Elena asked, without looking at him. "We're here now. Nothing else matters." "No," he replied firmly. "It doesn't matter. Because there are people who have decided this moment cannot exist. People who, if they find out who I really am, they won't spare you." She finally looked up, noticing the seriousness in his voice. The heat from the oven no longer seemed enough to ward off the chill seeping in through the bakery door. As the two exchanged glances, the world outside the bakery grew darker. Morven had already begun moving his pieces, unknown to either of them. An invisible but lethal threat approached silently, like a storm yet to show its lightning. The beggar clenched his fists. Then we'll need to be faster, more careful, and stronger than we've ever been. And Elena sensed that the battle that was beginning wouldn't just be against hunger or injustice. It would be against those who used their power to destroy humanity. The afternoon sun beat down on the streets of Valdener, but the light seemed dim against the shadows falling over the bakery. Elena was helping carry baskets of bread to hungry children when screams rent the air. Armed guards surrounded the street, pushing citizens back. The clang of chains and boots echoed between the narrow buildings, suffocating any hope that still lingered. "Ms. Elena, you're under arrest for distributing bread without paying taxes and inciting rebellion," the captain of the guard announced, tossing the parchment in front of her. Shock froze his body. His eyes widened, his voice cracked. "But, he swallowed hard. "I was just helping. Order of the council," the captain replied coldly. "No objections will be accepted." The children backed away, some crying, as the crowd watched helplessly. Elena felt the ground shake beneath her feet. She knew any gesture could cost someone their life. And suddenly, she realized that all her efforts, all the nights worked, all the bread distributed, had become grounds for accusation. The beggar took a few steps back, tense, his heart racing. Every moment held the possibility of irreversible disaster. The medallion on his chest seemed to burn with the urgency of the situation. He looked at Elena, seeing not just fear, but indignation, courage, and desperation. "No!" he shouted, stepping forward. "She didn't do anything wrong." The captain raised his spear threateningly. "Stand back, or you'll be arrested too." He swallowed hard. Time seemed to stretch in slow motion. The decision had to be made before Elena was dragged away, before the guards issued merciless orders. His blood was racing, the tension palpable, carrying every word, every gesture. "Stop," he said, more firmly than he felt. "I'm responsible for her. No one touches her." The captain hesitated. Something in the beggar's gaze, in the presence that exuded silent authority, made him retreat just a step. But the crowd sensed the gravity of the moment. This was not just about bread. It was about justice, identity, and hidden truth. Elena looked at him, surprised and confused, and then she realized something that would change everything. There was something about him, something beyond his miserable appearance, something that no one in the town could understand. The fate of the bakery, the city, and both of them was about to be rewritten. The air was heavy, sharp, as if the city itself were holding its breath. Elena stood surrounded by guards, eyes watering, hands trembling, trying to explain again that she had done nothing wrong. But their closed, cold, and implacable faces indicated her words had no effect. The beggar took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the medallion pressing down on his chest. He knew there was no more time. Every second increased the risk. Every glance at Elena was a silent threat. And then, in an instant that seemed suspended between heaven and earth, he made the decision that would change everything. "Wait!" The voice rang out clear and firm, cutting through the hubbub of the crowd. The guards turned, hands poised for action, as the crowd parted, sensing something monumental was about to happen. The man stepped forward, slowly removing the hood and soaked coat that covered his wasted, beggarly body. Each layer removed seemed to carry centuries of mystery. Finally, he held the medallion in plain sight, reflecting the sunlight now breaking through the clouds. "I am the King of Elander," he announced, his voice firm but tense. "And I order no one to touch this woman." Absolute silence fell. Children stopped crying. Guards froze, unable to process the revelation. Murmurs spread like wildfire. The beggar was not just a stranger. He was the sovereign himself, missing and now before them in the flesh. Elena backed away, her steps quick, confusion and pain etched on her face. How could you lie to me? Her voice trembled, a mixture of anger and disappointment. You knew who you were, and you deceived me all this time. It wasn't meant to be malicious, he replied, every word filled with sincerity. I needed to know the heart of the kingdom, to know those who truly care for the people before revealing myself. She shook her head, taking a few steps back. Meet the people, and me? I trusted you. Every gesture, every word, it was all a lie. He tried to move forward, but felt the barrier of disappointment she had erected. Elena, please don't push me away now. I need to think, she said, looking at him with eyes that mixed pain and disbelief. I need to understand if I can trust again. The king, standing beneath the sun illuminating the medallion, realized that his victory over injustice was still incomplete. He had saved Elena, but her trust would require another kind of courage. One that is earned not by decree, but by time, actions, and honesty. Shock hung in the air. The entire city seemed caught between disbelief and awe, and a new story began to unfold. The sun had already set, dyeing the sky red and gold, when Morven entered the throne room with measured steps. Guards loyal to him closed the doors behind him, cutting off the king from any exit. The air was thick with tension. Tapestry swayed in the draft through the open windows, as if the castle itself were protesting. Sir, the king. A soldier began hesitantly, but Morven raised his hand, silencing him with implacable authority. Silence, he said, his voice sharp. The kingdom needs order, and order demands that the usurper be stopped. He pointed at the king, now clearly exposed and vulnerable. You have lost the trust of the people, and the throne will be assumed by someone who knows how to govern. The king lifted his head, eyes shining with fury and disbelief. Morven, you dare? This throne belongs to the people, not to your whims. Whims? Morven laughed, cruel and empty. The people don't know what they want. They need strength, not sentimentality. He waved to the guards. Arrest him. In moments, the hall became a field of tension. Guards advanced, and the king fought, but he realized he was outnumbered. Every blow he dodged, every step he took back, made his heart race. He knew that if he fell, it wouldn't just be his throne he would lose, but all the hope of his people. Meanwhile, in the palace corridors, makeshift sirens blared. Messengers scurried about, spreading chaos. Rumors that the king had been captured and his advisor was seizing power. Court children cried, servants hid, and the townspeople heard news that spread fear like wildfire. The king, realizing he needed to act quickly, drew strength from the determination that defined him. Every muscle tensed, every breath controlled. He felt the weight of the medallion against his chest, a symbol of his blood, his lineage, and the responsibility he could never abandon. Morven! He roared, finding an opening. The kingdom will not surrender to tyranny. Morven just smiled arrogantly, but deep down he knew he had underestimated something. The king's presence was more than authority. It was living hope, and the city, even from a distance, felt the change in the air. The castle was in chaos. The throne seemed unstable. Every stone reflected tension and fear, and the battle wasn't just physical. It was moral, emotional, and political. Elander's fate hung in the balance. The king knew he would need more than brute force to win. He would need allies, and courage beyond what any crown could provide. The dawn air was heavy over Valdener. The city was awakening to the rumor that the king had been captured, and the castle was under the control of Counselor Morven. Elena, hidden among the tents and alleys, felt her heart race. Each step brought her closer to the bakery she had built. Each memory of distributed bread and grateful glances made her decision clearer. I can't just stand by, she muttered to herself, clenching her fist. He risked everything for us. Now it's my turn. She ran to the outskirts of the central square, where children and the poor still remembered the warmth of the bakery. With a firm voice, she began to gather those she knew. The beggar she had helped, the street vendors, even some merchants who quietly benefited from her courage. "Listen!" Elena shouted, raising her hands. "The king has been unjustly imprisoned. Morven has taken the castle. But together we can help him. Not for gold, not for power, but for what is right." The reaction was immediate. Murmurs turned to shouts of agreement. Bakers who had received help from Elena gathered, bringing knives, shovels, and courage. Children carried baskets, alerting other residents. The town, which had previously seemed submissive, began to rise like an unstoppable wave. The beggar, now king, watched from afar, confused and emotional. Elena had put aside the pain of disappointment. She had decided to fight, not for herself, but for something greater. "You don't have to," he shouted, running to meet her. "I can handle this alone." She looked him in the eye, firmly. "No, not alone. You showed me courage. Now it's my turn to show mine." Together, they advanced toward the castle, leading the people as they gathered, forming a sea of determination. Each step beat like a drum, each cry of support a silent weapon against fear. Guards loyal to Morven faltered before their collective courage, and doors that seemed impenetrable began to tremble. The kingdom was in chaos, but also in action. Elena, with courage pulsing in every gesture, proved that even the most humble person, armed with conviction and hope, could stand up to tyranny. The king felt the weight of responsibility and the relief of not being alone. Elena's sacrifice and resolve rekindled the flame of hope, a flame that could bring down even the traitorous advisor's darkest plans. The fate of the throne and the city now depended on every soul that joined them, moved by courage, justice, and humanity. The castle gates shook under the force of the assembled people. Elena led the front line, hands steady, eyes shining with determination. The sound of doors being broken down echoed through the marble corridors, while the wind carried the smell of smoke and mud from the square to the throne rooms. Inside, Morven waited, arms crossed, expression arrogant. "So the people have decided to rebel?" he said, his voice cold, each word cutting through the silence like a blade. "You think you can challenge my power?" The king stepped forward, his medallion glinting in the sunlight streaming through the broken windows. "Morven, you've forgotten something crucial. The throne is not yours. It belongs to the people, to justice, and to truth." The counselor laughed cruelly. "Justice? Truth? Words that distract the weak." He gestured, and his guards advanced. The shock was immediate. Blades clashed, footsteps echoed, screams filled the corridors. But it wasn't just a physical conflict. Every look, every gesture carried the weight of betrayal and hope. Elena helped the civilians advance through the corridors, guiding them courageously, dodging blows, and spreading determination. The king and Morven finally faced each other. The tension was almost palpable. "You infiltrated your own city?" Morven shouted, pointing to the medallion. "You deceived me. You deceived us." Deception was necessary. The king replied firmly, "To know true allies, to understand who truly defends the people." The final blow came in an instant. The king dodged a thrust from Morven and, with a speed only his life on the streets had taught him, disarmed the traitor. Guards loyal to Morven fell, either surrendered or disarmed by the advancing mob. Morven fell to his knees, eyes wide in defeat, as silence slowly returned to the hall. The king was breathing heavily, his body marked by cuts and exertion, but triumphant. Elena approached, placing her hand on his arm, her eyes teary. "Is it all over?" she asked, her voice low. "Finished, but not without cost," he replied, looking around. "Many were injured, others lost much. The kingdom will need rebuilding and confidence." The counselor was led away in handcuffs, muttering silent threats, while the city began to recover. Outside, the citizens celebrated, but also reflected on the price of tyranny and courage. The king took a deep breath, staring at Elena. "I couldn't have done this without you." She looked away, remembering the disappointment she'd felt when she'd discovered his identity. But something had changed. The victory wasn't just his. It was theirs, the people's, the courage they each carried. And for the first time, the kingdom felt that justice and humanity had returned. Though they still bore scars that time would need to heal. The sun was rising over Valdener, gilding the castle towers and illuminating the streets still scarred by the chaos of the previous night. The people gathered in the square, eyes alert and hearts wary, awaiting the king's first action after the victory. Elena stood beside the medallion, watching, finally free of fear, but with the vivid memory of the disappointment she had felt. "My friends, citizens of Valdener," the king began, his voice firm and filled with emotion. "I apologize for disappearing, for allowing injustices to occur under my rule. Today, I not only resume the throne, but also the responsibility to serve each of you." A murmur of approval ran through the crowd. Children smiled, some adults wept softly. Elena felt a tightness in her chest. This man was more than the beggar she had known. He was someone capable of sacrificing himself for the people and also of acknowledging his own mistakes. The king continued, lifting a basket of warm bread. Bread, a symbol of sustenance and humanity, will no longer be the privilege of a few. Every citizen will have the right to live with dignity, and all who have suffered injustice will receive redress. He distributed the loaves to nearby citizens, while Elena helped, smiling. Children ran, laughter filling the air, remembering their early days in the bakery that had now become a symbol of hope. The simple gesture, which once seemed small, now carried the grandeur of a restored kingdom. The king looked at Elena, his expression serious but gentle. "Thank you for showing me what true courage is, and for reminding me that leadership isn't just a decree," he said, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I only did what needed to be done," Elena replied, a restrained smile, a mixture of relief and understanding. "But we must not forget that justice must be constant, not just when danger knocks." He nodded. "I agree. And I promise that this time, our justice will be for everyone." The wind blew through the streets of Valdener, spreading the scent of freshly baked bread and hope. Through silent glances and gestures, the people realized that freedom and humanity had returned. The kingdom, though scarred, was beginning to heal. And Elena, looking at the king, felt that true strength lay not in the crown or the sword, but in the small acts of kindness that sustained an entire kingdom. Valdener Castle gleamed in the soft evening light, its towers reflecting golden and orange hues that seemed to embrace the entire city. The people still bustled through the streets, but now with soft smiles and hope in their eyes. Among them, Elena walked beside the king, observing every face, every gesture of silent gratitude. "Elena," he said, pausing at the top of the main hall staircase, hands steady but heart bare. "You not only saved the people, but you also saved me from myself. Without you, I would never have learned what it means to truly rule." She looked at him, surprised, her eyes shining with emotion. "I did what needed to be done. Nothing more." He smiled a rare, intimate smile. Then he removed from his pocket a small, polished wooden box containing a simple yet elegant ring. "I want you to walk by my side not just as an ally, but as my queen, not to adorn the crown, but to guide the kingdom with me." Elena swallowed, her heart racing. For a moment, memories of pain, distrust, and struggle flashed before her eyes. But something deep moved her. She took a deep breath and spoke. "I accept on one condition, that the throne will never be ours alone, that it will always be for the people, that our strength will serve the justice, goodness, and hope that all deserve." The king nodded, moved. "So be it." And may we never forget that every loaf of bread we distribute, every gesture of care, is more important than gold or power. They drew closer, hands clasped, and Elena felt the weight of the past dissolve in the heat of that moment. The city below applauded, but the true triumph was silent. The commitment to a just reign, made of courage, love, and humanity. As the sun disappeared, dyeing the sky violet and gold, the king and Elena stood side by side, gazing at the horizon. The aroma of fresh bread still wafted through the streets, reminding everyone that simplicity, kindness, and justice were Valdener's true crown. And so, between light and shadow, between struggles and forgiveness, the kingdom breathed again, not only free, but inspired by the power of hearts that decided to act with courage and love. And,